Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on a Monday evening to talk some Steelers football. It is currently my day off. I'll be back in studio tomorrow, but I just wanted to get in front of the camera here because we did get some latest Steelers news here surrounding an all-pro wide receiver that is now available for the Steelers to pick up in free agency, as well as the latest surrounding Aaron Rodgers. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We got a bunch of great Steelers content planned for you guys in studio this week, starting with Steelers Talk Live tomorrow evening. That'll be starting at around 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you guys bring your questions, all that great stuff, and we'll chop up some Steelers football tomorrow evening. Now, let's get into the news here. Starting with Tyreek Hill, who has been released by the Miami Dolphins today. And he is somebody that's a former All-Pro. He is somebody that is one of the better receivers in the National Football League over the last decade. He was a potential trade target that the Steelers could have considered last year before completely ripping up his knee midway through the season with the Miami Dolphins. Now, this is certainly an interesting possibility because there's already a lot of people suggesting that the Steelers could make a move for Tyreek Hill this offseason. And, the idea of combining the pure speed, at least on paper, of Tyreek Hill and DK Metcalf in the same offense. Not to mention Hill is a pretty darn good route runner. It's a very intriguing possibility because, you're probably not going to be spending too much at the quarterback position this year. It sounds like Aaron Rodgers is likely to be coming back as this team's starting quarterback. We'll talk about that later in today's show. So you can maybe afford to splurge a little bit at the wide receiver position. And if you feel like Tyreek Hill as a true deep threat in this offense is something that Mike McCarthy really wants to pair with DK Metcalf, I could certainly see it happening. Now, there certainly comes the potential of signing Tyreek Hill comes with its own set of risks and concerns. And honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, it's not my favorite idea for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of how to address the wide receiver position here during the offseason. First of all, he's coming off a very serious knee injury where that knee was completely shredded on that Thursday night. I believe it was Thursday night football game playing for the Miami Dolphins. It was close to the trade deadline. And if I'm the Steelers, I'd have to feel really good about his status, about his ability to run and run at his top speeds, because if he's not running at the same levels that he's been running at the last several years, and even if he loses his step by just a little bit, that's a reduced wide receiver right there. And he's somebody that's getting older as well. So we've seen some of these knee injuries, especially when it comes to speed and athletic type of receivers. It really, really hurts them, especially at this stage in their career. So to sign a Tyreek Hill at this point and in this stage of his career would be a pretty big risk. And, even if I felt good about the knee and all that different stuff, those risks still are present, and I would not want to bring him in for a ton of money. If the Steelers end up getting him, I would want it to be $20 million or less per season on whatever deal he signs, whether it's a one-year prove-it deal, which is what I think he probably ends up signing. I think he probably ends up signing a one-year deal with somebody to prove that he still is Tyreek Hill, and then hopefully get a multi-year deal in 2027. I think that's probably the plan that Tyreek is going to go down here. But if I had to guess right now, I don't think he's going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. If I had to guess right now, I think he's going to be a Kansas City Chief, just because, he's already, teased that he could go back to Kansas City this offseason. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, I know, would love to play with him again. I know Kelce's a free agent, but he's likely to head back to Kansas City this year. It just kind of seems like a situation where Tyreek might be willing to go back to Kansas City for less money and try to win another Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. They are in need of that number one downfield threat. They've been trying to replace him over the years with guys like Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, and it just hasn't really worked out. Tyquan Thornton last year for a bit. They have Rashee Rice, who's a great underneath and yak type of player. But they don't have that true, get open deep type of guy. And obviously Tyreek and Patrick Mahomes already have an excellent chemistry. So if Tyreek's market is going to be affected by his knee injury and he's not going to be making all that much money, and he's not going to be that valuable on the open market, I could certainly see him getting $20 million on a one-year deal to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that makes a lot more sense than to go to the Steelers, a team that's likely going to have like Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. He has no prior connection to Rodgers. He has no prior connection to Brian Angelico or DK Metcalf or any of the top players here in Pittsburgh. Honestly, I think that Jalen Waddle might be more of a more likely wide receiver that played for Miami last year that could play for the Steelers. We know the Steelers were pursuing Waddle in a trade before the NFL trade deadline last year. So honestly, I would say Jalen Waddle might be more likely of a trade, more likely of a wide receiver target than Tyreek Hill for the Steelers at this point. But now I want to shift gears here to Aaron Rodgers, guys, as I believe it was last Friday, Brooke Pryor from ESPN came out with her latest reporting, which is that the Pittsburgh Steelers would quote-unquote like to know whether Aaron Rodgers will be returning to the team. It's been previously reported before NFL free agency, which starts on March 11th. But the new reporting from Brooke Pryor, apparently the team would like to know before the start of the NFL Combine, which starts coming up here on February 23rd. So we got about a week here for Aaron Rodgers to meet this quote unquote deadline that the Steelers have apparently placed on him. But something that I do want to point out about this report from Brooke, guys, is that wanting or liking to know something is different than needing to know something. I'm sure the Steelers would have really liked to know if Aaron Rodgers was going to be, coming last year before the NFL draft. I'm sure they would have liked to know as soon as possible once free agency opened. But the question really is, when do they need to know? And I think for the Steelers this year, it is earlier than it was last year, because last year, you try and pursue Aaron, you give him a couple days, and by the time the rest of the quarterbacks are taken elsewhere and they're taking their talents elsewhere, the Steelers really didn't have a choice. They had to sit there and wait for Aaron Rodgers. But this year, I think the Steelers are very intentional that they want to have a plan to have a quarterback under contract very, very early in the stages of free agency this year. They don't want to be the team that's waiting around for somebody this year. And I know a lot of people, for some reason, seem to think that Aaron Rodgers loves to take his time and he enjoys this and he wants to take his time because he hasn't decided or whatever. No, last year the reason why Aaron Rodgers made the Steelers wait a couple extra months was because he had loved ones in his life that were dealing with cancer, and he didn't want to make a full commitment to a season until their situations got to a point where he knew it wasn't going to get worse, and it got to a point where he would have to leave the team in order to take care of his people and be there fully from an emotional to a mental to a physical standpoint. Rodgers wanted to make sure that he could make that full commitment to the Steelers. This year, at least to my knowledge, there is nothing like that going on in Aaron Rodgers' life to the point where it's going to force him to wait to make a decision. And then even last year, the Steelers knew exactly what was going on. They pretty much knew for sure he was coming. It was just a matter of how are things progressing in those people's cancers battles. And lucky for those people and lucky for us, those situations improved enough where Aaron Rodgers decided eventually to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers before mandatory minicamp. This year, I think the date where they need to know by is maybe, a couple days, maybe a day before NFL free agency, because the Steelers want to be able to shift to a contingency plan in case Rodgers decides to retire. And I think Rodgers is going to be perfectly fine abiding by this timeline. I really do. I think that he's going to be just fine sitting there. And he might even make a decision this week. I think, if the Steelers have told him, hey, we'd love a decision this week, it sounds like he's already told people, and those people have told Terry Bradshaw and others that that he plans on coming back. And, it sounds like he's already told Mike McCarthy, hey, if you want me to come back for another season, I want to come back, or I'll come back and play for you. And we already know that McCarthy wants him to come back. So it just seems like a matter of time to me at this point, guys, before we get word that Aaron Rodgers will be returning for a second season here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he will be the starting quarterback for this football team heading into next season. And I think we will for sure have word on that before free agency begins in a couple of weeks here. And I feel very good about the chances of maybe even getting word on that this week before the start of the NFL Combine, because I think the reason why Brooks says the Steelers want, a decision by the Combine is because they want to know how, closely they should be looking into Ty Simpson, because if Aaron Rodgers leaves and then they end up not getting one of the younger quarterback options on the market, like a Malik Willis, for example, and they end up getting a Geno Smith or a Kirk Cousins, two options, by the way, I do not want here in Pittsburgh. But let's just say, for example, that that's who they end up with in free agency this year. I think they would take a hell of a look at a guy like Ty Simpson in the first round in that scenario, and they want to know whether or not to really put a lot of their time and resources looking at Ty Simpson heading into this process. Whereas if Aaron Rodgers comes back, it's possible that they, don't take such an intensive look at Ty Simpson. I'm sure they'll do their homework on him and all that different stuff. Honestly, with his mental processing ability, he fits a Mike McCarthy style offense really, really well, if I'm being completely honest with you. He's got some good arm talent. Reminds me a little bit more of like a souped up Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy's been super, super productive in this league. And really the main thing that Purdy's had struggles with, and what's the thing that holds Purdy back as a quarterback, is the lack of arm strength. And, if you don't have the requisite arm strength to push the ball down the field into super tight windows, particularly when the defense is playing back and they're, playing to the sticks on 3rd and longs and all those different things, if you can't hit those tight windows consistently, you're going to struggle when your team is losing on 2-minute drills, stuff like that. And that's really where Purdy's struggled the most. Ty Simpson's got a stronger arm than Brock Purdy. So if Ty Simpson, is, kind of that pro-ready, under center, Shanahan, McVay, even McCarthy style, quarterback where you need to be a good mental processor, play with precision, all those different things. I think Simpson is going to be somebody that for sure gets taken in the first round. And if Rodgers ends up retiring, I think the chances of him becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler certainly go up. Brooke Pryor did say in this report, by the way, guys, that Rodgers is more likely than not going to be returning to the Pittsburgh Steelers for another season. It seems like the expectation in the building is that he will be returning. It seems like he's had multiple conversations with Mike McCarthy at this point, multiple conversations with DK Metcalf, among others. It seems like his teammates really want him back. And at this point, I do believe that Rodgers will be back for another season. And for that matter, I think Cam Hayward will be back for another season. And, the Steelers, from their perspective, they're not rebuilding this thing, man. Like they brought in Mike McCarthy, somebody that's been a seasoned veteran who has been in this league for 18 years, has won a lot of football games, not because they want to start over and they want to completely tear this thing down and build it back up. It's, we want to continue to try to compete right now while also building the future. And we've talked at length of why I think Mike McCarthy's a good option at head coach for that. I've talked about why I think Aaron Rodgers, for the first year of this McCarthy era, is a perfect quarterback for this team, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. If you get Aaron Rodgers a couple more good weapons, I'm telling you, man, the production that you see from Rodgers next year is going to go up, and the offensive production is going to go up. It wouldn't surprise me if this Steelers team has a top 10 offense in football next year with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, if they can get DK Metcalf two other really, really good receiving options, and then pair those 3 wide receivers with a guy like Pat Freiermuth, who we know has an awesome connection with Rodgers, is an awesome receiving tight end, is a perfect fit for Mike McCarthy's, pass to open up the run, shotgun West Coast style of offense. So, I'm pretty excited to see what's going to happen here. Tyreek Hill's another name that we're going to be discussing probably in the next few weeks as the Steelers look to really address the wide receiver position. That's something they got to get right. I've been stressing that all offseason long. This is something that Omar Khan has not been able to deliver the last 2 years. He brings in Van Jefferson, and then last year he brings in Jonnu Smith to fix the wide receiver position, and then he fails to get a deal done at the deadline for Jacoby Myers and Rashid Shaheed and all these guys. This offseason, he cannot fail. He's got it, especially if Rodgers is going to come back, guys. Like, if Rodgers is back, he's not somebody that creates out of structure all that much anymore. He's got to win from within the pocket. He's got to win from within structure. So like Tom Brady in his older days, and frankly, Tom Brady throughout his entire career, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Matthew Stafford, who just won MVP with the Rams. Like, there's examples in the modern NFL of guys that don't move, that don't create with their legs, that don't create out of structure. And if you have a really good football IQ and if you have really good arm talent, two things that Rodgers still possesses, I still think you can be a very productive NFL quarterback. That is, if you have the right help around you. You got to have the play caller that can scheme people open quickly, and you got to have the wide receiver talent that can beat man coverage. And the Steelers didn't have that last year, so it kind of limited the kind of quarterback and the kind of production that Rodgers could have in the Steelers offense. So with two more really good receiving weapons added to the Steelers offense with the improved play calling brought on by Mike McCarthy, I do have a lot of hope and optimism that this Steelers offense can take that next step next year. And you guys know how I feel about Patrick Graham and this Steelers defense. It's the most talented defense he's ever had to work with. I think he's somebody that gets the most out of his defensive personnel. And that's, a breath of fresh air coming from a Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin scheme that was a bit outdated and kind of put his players, specifically inside linebackers, in places to fail. And I think that right now I'm in a pretty hopeful and optimistic state when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if that's fashionable or not, but I truly believe that this Steelers team can get better and take that next step with Mike McCarthy as their head coach here in 2026. But they got to get the wide receiver position right. Tomorrow and throughout the week here, guys, I'm going to be going over the wide receiver position pretty much ad nauseum. I'm going to be talking about free agency targets, draft targets, trade targets at the wide receiver position. You guys are going to know every single wide receiver that the Steelers could bring in this offseason. We're also going to have a perfect offseason plan this week. We got a bunch of great Steelers content ready to be filmed this week in studio. I can't wait to get it going with you guys. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I will be back in studio tomorrow for our first video of the day, where I think I'm going to talk about the latest quarterback rumors that are going around. There's people saying the Steelers should bring in Malik Willis and Kyler Murray, and some people even saying Kirk Cousins, Tanner McKee. There's a bunch of names being thrown out there. I want to cover all that tomorrow morning, guys. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you haven't already, because tomorrow I'm going to be covering QB rumors surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers.